I was 12 years old, sitting on the chair in my doctor's office with my parents beside me. The doctor walks in, looks at me in my frail state, looks at my parents, and says, "Your daughter has anorexia. Likely, she will have this illness for most of her life." Whoa. I'm 12 years old. All I know is that I'm hungry all the time, but I can't eat. And although she said those words to me, that I would have this illness for most of my life, something inside of me didn't believe it was true. Eventually, we found an eating disorder specialist who instructed me to follow a healthy diet while my mother supervised my meals at home. One day, my dear uncle came to the house. We loved him so much. We looked up to him and respected him greatly. And my dad debriefed him on what had happened. And Uncle came over to me and looked at me with concern in his eyes. And he said, "Sweetheart, you are a strong girl, and you are going to get better." I heard those words. At that time, I didn't know if I really believed them, but I heard them. And I think something inside of me knew that they were true, but I needed to discover what that was. Now, eventually, I did get myself to a healthy weight, but I still had a lot of difficulties that I needed to navigate within myself. Like, why did I stop eating? What motivated that? And I began to ask the questions that many patients ask when they go on a journey of discovering what true health is. And that is, who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? And what is the meaning of my life? So I did what any keen researcher does, and I read as much as I could about health. I studied books, I read stories of patients that had healed from all kinds of unbelievable illnesses. And I studied the art and science of health. I realized both were equally important. I traveled across the planet. I went to India, to Peru, to Central America, to Mexico, Egypt. I studied with doctors. I talked to patients. I took programs and courses. I did a doctorate in naturopathic medicine, a degree in kinesiology. And of course, I continue to learn to this day. I've talked to thousands of patients. I've taught thousands of students. And in all of the stories that I've heard, I have recognized that one of the most powerful teachings is the power of words. How we communicate with ourselves and with each other. I was brought back to my 12-year-old self. You are a strong girl. Now, we're going to discuss the power of words in two different categories. One, the negative words. Two, the virtuous words. This is truly important because the way that we speak to one another and to ourselves matters. From how a diagnosis is delivered, to how we speak to a patient at their bedside, to how we talk to our child who's going through a crisis. The words we say, how we say them, the gestures we use, our intent, all matter. Now, negative words arise from negative thoughts and negative emotions. Thoughts and emotions that come from anger, fear, self-doubt, judgment, worry, overwhelm. All the different kinds of negative emotions and thoughts that move into the category of stress that many of us are familiar with. The effect of negative emotions is that we disconnect from ourselves, we disconnect from others, we break relationships, and we can get sick. In fact, Khalil Gibran says, between what is said and not meant, and what is meant but not said, most of love is lost. So let's not say what we don't mean, and let's say what we truly mean. In one neuroscience study, they found that whether words are said, heard, or thought, it can contribute negatively to anxiety. In fact, it can contribute to chronic anxiety. Now, I remember the day that I realized that all of my thoughts needed to change. I had a realization, an insight. I was walking with my dad along the seawall, and I became acutely aware that I had so many doubts in myself, so many fears, and that I needed to change this thinking and this feeling. And that set me on a path to study the virtues. Now, the virtues are qualities that we all carry within us. The word virtue means to rise up, a quality of excellence. Virtue also originates from hero, merit. And like acorns that are about to become oak trees, we carry all of the virtues within us in a seed-like form. Qualities like patience, kindness, compassion, humility, forgiveness, love. Now, we're going to go through the virtues, and I'd like you to think about how they manifest in your own life. We have the virtue of patience. Now, patience is something Aristotle says is bitter, but the fruits are sweet. And when we cultivate patience, what begins to happen is that we are less impatient. We feel more at peace and more at ease with ourselves and with each other. We're able to sit through challenging situations and not try to influence the outcome, but rather we pay attention to the best possible case scenario that could occur for everyone involved. When we speak from patience, we speak softly, intelligently, kindly. And then we have another virtue, the virtue of fortitude. Now, my father and my uncle, they were immigrants from India to Canada, and they experienced a lot of hardship in their time. And in that, they cultivated emotional and mental fortitude. Much of the time we think about fortitude in terms of physical strength, but true strength is physical, mental, and emotional. It's an indication of your emotional IQ, in fact. So the words that they said to me, "You are strong," they could say those words because they cultivated those qualities of fortitude and strength within themselves. And then we have the virtue of humility. Humility is maintaining an essence of beginner's mind. It's understanding that we have so much to learn. In fact, we never reach the top of the mountain because there's always another mountain to climb. Einstein says that the true genius admits he knows nothing. And in fact, in all of my travels and studies, out of all the teachers that I've had, the ones that have taught me the most are the ones who are the most humble. There's a look that happens in their eyes. It's truly beautiful. It's knowing that there's so much more to know. And the little that we know is a gift. But there's so much more to know. So when we speak from humility, we speak words of beauty, of grace. We speak from this place within ourselves that honors life, honors our place in life, nature, all those around us. We see that we're part of a greater whole, and each individual is equally important in that greater whole. Now, we have another virtue, which is hope. And in fact, the emblem of this school reminds me of hope. It's a torch with fire burning bright. There's a quote by Emily Dickinson, and it says, "Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings a tune without the words and never stops at all." Students are hope. The future is in your hands and in your hearts. You carry the torch. And when you live your life from this place of hope, your words change. You encourage each other. You cheer each other on through difficult times. You help one another. You realize that every single one matters. There's value. Then we have the wonderful virtue of kindness. In the last year of my father's life, year and a half, he was diagnosed with what's called malignant mesothelioma. It's a type of cancer from asbestos poisoning. And although we spent a lot of time in and out of doctors' offices and in hospitals, unfortunately, a lot of the time, the news that we received wasn't what we wanted to hear. But what we would talk about after certain appointments with different nurses and doctors was how a particular nurse or doctor spoke to my father with great care, love, and kindness. And Dad would always say, "That nurse was really wonderful. I was hungry and I wanted another sandwich and she gave it to me." Those were the things that we ended up talking about because that was the good news. That was the good news. And a lot of the time, we may think that it's a small thing. But for somebody who's in the last year of his life, it's a huge thing to receive kindness and care. And then we have wisdom. Now, wisdom is something that I was searching for. Like many of you, I had studied and studied. I'd taken courses and written exams. Yes, you could call me book smart. But I knew that there was more. And that's when I went to travel to these different places around the world, these ancient wisdom cultures. and I immersed myself so that I could directly experience what they were talking about. And in this process, I started to recognize that wisdom takes you so much further in life. You cut through the chase. Often what we hear from elders, or grandparents perhaps, that experience that they share is something that we can gain when we're young too. If we think about the role models that we have in our life, why are they role models? Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, all of these people, they have this incredible virtue about them and wisdom. So when we surround ourselves with wisdom, our words change. We say less with more. We say what will ultimately help that person in their life. That really becomes the goal in life, is to be able to serve others, to be able to help. And then there's compassion. Compassion is this longing, yearning to alleviate the suffering of all those around us. It's developing an altruistic attitude, a recognition that your happiness is my happiness. We are not separate. In fact, I'm reminded by a time that I spent in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery in India in 2012. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama was doing a ceremony about cultivating compassion. And we sat there with 30,000 Tibetan monks meditating on compassion and cultivating compassion. And I couldn't have been happier. It was a breath of fresh air. This is what the world needs. So my hope is that you are able to see that all of these virtues, they're seeds inside of you. We all have experiences with them every day. We all carry them. But we're meant to cultivate them and grow them so that they can be the oak trees that they deserve to be. And when we cultivate virtuous emotions and thoughts, our words change. And those words have the power to impact all the people in our life. Now, it's said that 1 out of 2 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer in their life, and that 6 out of 10 North Americans will be diagnosed with a chronic disease in their life. So the likelihood that all of us will be beside people who need our help, love, and support is high. By cultivating the virtues within us, which ultimately fall under the entirety of love, we become beacons of this light that we are, and we support and help those around us. The power of words lives in virtue. We all have access to this. Cultivate it for yourself. Share it with all those around you. Be a catalyst in your life. See your life change and see everyone's life change. Thank you.